Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. It's Dara and Jamie here again, and today we have a really interesting one. We're talking about the resurgence of the Red Butchers.
Oh, at last. At
They're
last.
back.
They're
They are
back,
back,
baby.
and they're here to rip and tear.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's dive in. Okay, so really interesting topic today, I
Yeah.
think, because historically, this channel has been known for our, I wouldn't say hatred of the Red Butchers, but certainly affinity towards choosing any other possible unit over
Yeah.
them in the
I think
last
that's
while.
fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think the Red Butchers, when they initially came out, were the business. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they were amazing, and I think every World Eater player needed them in their lists all the time when, you could do some silly stuff with them in 8th edition.
Yeah.
And I think at the start of ninth they were okay. You know, I was
Yeah.
still I was still using them a bunch, and I think it's pretty fair to say that as time went on, I know I stuck with them for a bit longer than you,
Yeah.
and but even then I dropped off after a while, just thinking they weren't worth the points, and they got traded out too easily against like units that were worth less or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think for me, it was the Marine meta that we were in definitely at the start of ninth. I 100% agree with your analysis of 8th edition because they were super good when, especially if you were souping or something like that and could really pump them up. But once ninth hit and we was in that kind of reasonably long period of Marines and Death Guard and things like that. Death Guard, especially for me, with Terminators, how Terminators were supposed to be, in my opinion. That for me was like, yep, no matter what I go into, I'm trading 200, almost 300 points into 130 odd points of jump guys with thunder hammers who just pick them up, or lightning claws and shields, whatever it was, and it didn't feel good. Um, and the onset of ninth edition, we were still having all the holdover from 8th edition. Terrain wasn't really what it is. Nowhere close to what it is now. For the density and the understanding of how to use it as well. I think it's taken me a long time, probably a lot of us a long time, to really grasp how to use our terrain, especially as an army like us who really needs it. And yeah, myself definitely, and I know yourself and several others, we've kind of, Red Butchers is 2 CP and we need our CP, and you know, our Warp Talons can do the same thing but cheaper, and we've got Melter on the drills, or we can, whatever it is, it always felt like there was something that could do it a bit cheaper or a bit better or something. Um, but I think our minds have been changed just a little bit, maybe quite a lot actually. Because you recently had a little bit of success with them. I've been pretty happy with them myself in quite a few games. So why? All right, tell us why you're using them right now, like specifically, and maybe a little bit why you're using them and how your mind has actually come. I want to use them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know yourself, it's a pretty funny reason as to
Yeah.
why I ended up using them. So, in the lead up to the Broadsword GT, I was really struggling to paint Chosen because, I mean, look, we've all seen the leaks about what Chosen are going to have,
Yeah.
and also there's the uncertainty of whether or not they're going to be in the World Eater Codex.
Yeah.
So, I was having to paint up 5 Chosen, which I was like, this loadout is only going to be legal for the next couple of months, and then
Yeah.
it won't be. So I was just like, man, I'm not feeling this vibe. I don't want to paint these guys. I'm not inspired. Whatever. So it was getting closer to the event, and I was like, look, I'm just not getting these guys done. It's just not going to happen basically
Mm-hmm.
because I paint so slowly. So I was like, okay, what'll I put in instead? And I was kind of going through my list, blah blah, trying to see what would fit in, and very much like last minute, spur of the moment. I think it was like the day before list submission had to be in. I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna put in 8 Red Butchers. It's safe. It's familiar. I know what it does. I don't have to train with it. I'm like, I know what that unit can do. Let's put them in. And they So if you guys have not already seen, I went 3-2 at Broadsword, and the 3 wins I got were entirely down to the Red Butchers, I would say, and plays I made with them. So yep, came away from that being like every World Leader list I'm gonna write now will have 8 Red Butchers in it, almost guaranteed,
Oh yeah,
which is a really big swing, obviously,
yeah.
from where things were. But yeah, so I've been running them 8 of them with a banner and combi bolters and lightning claws, which
Hmm.
is a cheap kind of a. I like to keep them cheaper rather than
Yes.
necessarily like with fancy combi weapons or anything like that. And I just think the utility I get out of them and their ability to cause absolute havoc when people aren't ready for the things they can do. I think they're one of those units that can really exploit the 6-inch consolidation more than
Yes.
5 berserkers, because when you're moving around like 8 Terminator sized models, it's just different. You
Mm.
can do so much more with those consolidation moves,
Yeah.
and they have more presence on the board as well, and obviously they'll put out an extreme amount of damage against basically anything in the game.
Hmm.
There's very few things that'll stand up to a double activation from them, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And my resurgence with them is very similar. Been playing as much as I can on TTS. I try and get two, maybe 3 or 4 games every weekend on TTS right now. And the reason I took them, I had a tournament, an RTT coming up last month, and I was looking at what models I had painted, what I wanted to use that I hadn't used in a little while. I needed some anti tank weaponry, and I had combi melters for my Terminators. I didn't actually end up taking them to the tournament, but that's what my plan was, and I got everything ready. So I threw them in my list, practice games. Um, and it took me a few games to relearn because I hadn't really used them in the best part of 2 years, year and a half, and to really kind of understand what they can do, and what to expect of them. And they can have. I think their strength for me is their versatility, because you can do a lot with them starting on the table. You can do a lot with them deep striking them, and the banner being 10 points is an auto take. I think you have to take the banner on them because they
Yep.
are a unit that you will. The 50-50, you're going to want to deep strike them. Like your Warp Talons, unless it's on a mission versus Tau, or a game versus Tau, or a game where there's no pre game move, you need to start them on the board just for that ability to jump them forwards and be a threat. Terminators, if they come down and you've got a good position to deep strike them, maybe your opponent's running quite an elite army or lots of chaff even. If you've got bolters on there, they're coming down and they're picking up they're denting a unit. You can still vets that bolter as well if you need to. There's a lot of things they can do from any position on the table if they're equipped in the right way. And whilst they are only 2 wounds, which is better than 1 wound, but not by
They're the only
much.
2 wounds we have.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Possessed, but
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I
That's
know.
next on the list. Next
Yeah,
on the
right. We'll
list.
make them work somehow. But yeah, the 2 wounds and the 2 up and the 5 up as well. Um, as I was looking at it, this is about a week ago. I think I may have mentioned it to you. Like we've been advocating Chosen for a reasonable time because Chosen have a place, or they have had a place. But if you look at 5 Chosen with a Lightning Claw and a Combi Bolter, and 5 Terminators or Red Butchers with a Lightning Claw and a Combi Bolter, the points differential isn't that much. But you get 5 extra wounds, you get a 2 up save native and a 5 up invuln, and if you spend the CP, which you should be doing at this point, I think, you're getting strength 5 and double fight. You're getting a lot for, I want to say, 30 to 40 points on the
Yeah,
upgrade.
and the ability to deep
Deep
strike as
strike,
well, and
yes. And you sacrifice an inch of movement, but you're going to
maximum
be
range
frenzy
rapid
and then
fire
more
as
deep
well.
striking them.
So
Yeah.
I just think it wasn't really until you said that to me during the week about the point differential that I was like, you know what, it's just value.
Yes.
And like in the scheme of things, Terminator units outside of our codex are quite expensive, or Terminator equivalent units are quite expensive.
Yeah.
And kind of the fact that I think the Red Butchers are, in a relative sense, inexpensive. Like you're
Yes.
talking 230, 250 points for a squad, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
That can trade up really well if you're putting it in the right places. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me is understanding where, when, and who to put the Red Butchers into. You
Yeah.
know, and you're really only going to get that with practice.
Yeah.
And I think once you kind of crack that down, once you know where they're going to have the most impacts and how to bring them to that point, it just changes the unit. So, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, they won me all those tournament games, because be it starting on the board or coming in from deep strike, just knowing where they needed to be and what they needed to kill, it can just really flip the game. And it can. The thing is, at the end of the day, it's just so much harder for your opponent to kill 8 2 wound, 2+ save, 5 up invuln guys, or 8 berserker equivalents. It takes not a significant amount of resource, but enough to give them pause and be like, okay, I have to deal with these guys, or else it's going to be a massive headache.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, they are an alpha unit. Even if you only bring 5 of them, then once you've explained it to your opponent, they're going to know, okay, this is a unit that has to die. Because if it makes combat, like you said, there's very little that survives. Now, sure, 5 of them, if they're interrupted, but they're still doing damage just from the volume of quality attacks. And once you hit that 8 or 10 models, it's obviously everyone knows what Terminators are, even if they're not the hottest unit in the world. Everyone knows what a Terminator does, and if they're played right and you get average to good dice rolls, Terminators are good. They're just not always efficient, depending on what you can do to them. Red Butchers, I think, is probably one of the best upgrades. I think, obviously, Emperor's Children Terminators are very good, but that's because of access to powers that we don't. But as a standalone, here's your buff for the entire game, you make them a target, and you make your opponent aware of them, and then your opponent has to dedicate to them alongside or instead of your Lord of Skulls or your Drills or your Rhino Rush or whatever else, because multiple 2-wound 2-ups, if they want to shoot their melter in there, you're still saving a third of them, and each melter's is only killing a 2-wound model, whereas against your Lord of Skulls it's doing up to 8 damage. 8 damage on the Terminator, okay, great.
Big deal. Yep.
Okay, here's 7 more for you to chew through. And once you kill them, you've left, 1,800 points of my army is still coming for you. So there's a quality and quantity there.
Yeah, for sure. I think their ability to apply pressure because realistically, let's be real, they're never surviving more than a single turn. Once they've done their trick, they're a one-trick pony, right? But they can apply pressure in a sector of the board, I would say up to a quarter of the board.
Yeah.
And the pressure they will apply will involve your opponent having to dedicate so much resource to changing that battlescape in that moment, that it will buy you so much time to move the rest of your forces into a position where they can really capitalize on it. Now, if you start to combo things with a Warp Talon Alpha Strike, followed by Red Butchers like Beta Strike, and then you've got Berserkers coming in for your third wave, you're laughing. That's the ideal game,
Yeah.
You go first, you just have that. That's the perfect game for us.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not always possible, but I think it's really important to be able to understand how, if that doesn't necessarily come up that exact way, that the ways to move your Red Butchers, where to position them, what to take advantage of, all these small little plays that we were talking about earlier. And you're really only going to get that from using them and practicing with them. But once you get that down, they will just become such a great toolbox unit that you can use to just, as I said, put so much pressure in one place that has to be dealt with. Because as soon as your opponent sees how much damage they can do, they know that if that unit is alive in the next turn, it's big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got a lot of psychological benefits for the controlling player to fully amp them up, big them up, talk them up, explain to your opponent this 250 point unit if you don't
Yep.
interrupt, is doing, like 60 attacks. We're re-rolling, we're exploding. I've got 2 or 3 strats that I can play on them. You know what? And if I'm feeling hungry, I might spend another 3 CP and they'll fight a third time. So, those 3 tanks
Yep.
you've got in the back line, if they make it, they're done. Like, it's over. Like, your
Yep.
game is over if you let me do this. And then they're like, okay, so I have to kill them. They must die. Meanwhile, Warp Talons. Here's drills. Here's a Leviathan. It's one of those things. It's using a fairly costed but meta generally inefficient unit and squeezing a psychological trick out with it is what can tip them over. Because like you say, they will probably die once your opponent gets the initiative against them. But if you can use them, like they can do the work. I had a game versus Tau last weekend. I still lost, but I lost by like 5 points. I can't remember the exact score. Something like 77-73 or something like that. And I only had 5 Red Butchers, and I traded them against a squad of... no, it was 10 Red Butchers, sorry. But I traded them, and this is terrible, against a squad of crew.
Yeah,
I
nice.
gave away almost 300 points in Red Butchers for 60-70 points of crew. But if I hadn't have done that, because it was allowed them to catapult up, and with the 6-inch consolidate, I could negate them having their primary objective, like by just towing in on it, and he only had a single broadside touching it, so he didn't score his home objective in that round. He didn't get any primary points. So it was an expensive play, but I think it was the only play I had with him in that game, because it's Tau, and if I'm charging anything else, it's -2 to charge. It's 8,000 -1 shots coming in at me. It's a lot of things which they won't survive. But you have to know what you're going to do with them in a way. You have to pick a unit, and that is the toughest choice. Like, I looked at that, I was like, man, I don't want to throw 300 points against 60, but it's the only thing I've got. And it helped. It gave me victory points. So that bleeds in. What are some little kind of tricks, some little plays where you're kind of not exploiting the rules, but you're fully using the rules of the game that maybe you've had, like whether it's to do with our stratagems or terrain rules or whatever? Like, what's some things that you've picked up?
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head at the start of this video when you talked about the fact that as Ninth has evolved, our understanding of terrain and how it should be used has changed with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really has allowed the Red Butchers to have a lot more play than they previously did. So, for example, in like a WTC board or a GW kind of competitive terrain board, there's a lot of areas that the Red Butchers can be on the board without being directly threatened by line of sight targeting shooting, which means that like you actually have the mobility to kind of move them around and position them in the right places, which is something I really took advantage of in that tournament I was just at, where a lot of the time they just started on the board, and sometimes I frenzied them, sometimes I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I always had them in a position where I was like, okay, I've picked my target for them and I know I can launch them from here. And basically, they'll trade out into a unit that I know needs to die or just be in a position that basically they will put that pressure down, which will force my opponent to have to react and change up the whole game so that they're playing at my pace rather than me playing at their pace. And I think that is one thing they allow you to do, is just change that pace of the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, just positioning around terrain, I found it super useful. I think the 6-inch consolidate strat is better on them than anyone else in the World Leader Codex, because I think the size of the unit and the fact that it's slow in the normal movement phase, and the fact as well that like most of the time they will kill what they want to kill on their first activation if you put the right strats into them. So if you do that, you basically have, what's it going to be, like 12 plus another 3, so 15 inches of movement then to just, if you're smart about it, go where you want to go. I know you have to move towards the closest enemy unit, but you can move that way in a way that suits you. So you can wrap and trap, you can touch objectives, you can shut down shooting, or you could just be a screen or something like that. Like, that play is really what clinches it for me, you know.
Yeah.
And like I said, because it's a big unit of big models, the exploitation of that stratagem is just for one CP. It's dare I say it's broken, you know. Dare I say it?
It's borderline. It combos well. Let's put it like that. And
Yeah,
it's not a typical combo. Like your normal combos are you're stacking your +1 to hit with re-rolls and cherry picking mortal wounds on 5+s. And this is a movement combo. It's the red butchers, so you double fight. It's your 6-inch consolidate. It is probably the most common thing when we talk to anyone who is winning games with World Eaters. What was the biggest thing for you? The ability to move, the ability to abuse and exploit the movement shenanigans we do have in the fight phase, in the charge phase, whatever non-movement phase we've got pre-game. That's what wins us games, because it puts us in the position where we can use the only advantage we do have elsewhere, which is the fight phase. But the fight phase doesn't mean anything if you don't get there. So yeah, absolutely using that consolidate,
yep,
vital.
yep.
Absolutely.
I also am of the opinion that in the upcoming unreleased Eldar meta that we're probably going to be playing into, man, they're going to be so good into Eldar. Like, stupid good. If you even think about, like, you got 10 guys that's like 40 combi bolter shots.
Yeah.
Into tough 3, not great armor save units. Whew,
Yeah.
that'll pick up. And I just think they're going to do absolute work into the Eldar in a big, bad way.
Yep. The only thing I'm concerned about with Eldar, which maybe we need to do a separate video, is Harlequins.
Yeah, well, that's different. Yeah, that is a different vibe.
Just depends on how much they take up in the meta, how much real estate they occupy. But yeah, like your average Eldar, your craft worlds, Azarani, however you want to call it. Yes, like Bolters become good again versus them. They're already okay because of Tau, for the most part, for whatever else. But yeah, against your craft world Eldar, they definitely, yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're popping vets on there, and you're wounded and re-rolling, wounded on 2s, re-rolling. Like,
yeah, come on, you know,
need vets, to be honest.
Yeah, you don't even need to get into combat after that. They're all dead.
Yeah, you put vets
so I
on
think
your cultists, but yeah,
for sure. Right? Yeah. I do think they'll play well into that sort of style, and man, like Eldar are really expensive as well. They won't have a hard time trading up. Yeah, they are like. So I think from that sense, like a complete tangent, like the Elder Codex is really well written from that sense that like they almost feel too expensive, which makes it so much easier to balance in the long term because they just have to drop some points. But for the interim, like it will not be difficult for a unit of Red Butchers to go into a squad of Banshees, a squad of Wraiths, whatever, and just be like, you know what, I made my trade there. And it was a good trade.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've also done my 6-inch consolidate, and I've touched your Falcon or your Fire Prison. What are you going to do? Deal with it.
Put on the shades.
Yep, but literally turn the cap backwards. So I do think it's a weird one because it's like we said, I don't think the unit has particularly gotten better. I think it's become more efficient. And I think it's a better anti-meta unit at the minute because there's an awful lot of I don't want to say Death Stars for want of a trigger warning for the 7th edition veterans, but like, you know, big Virtus Praetor blobs, big Scarab Occulter, Death Shroud, or whatever suits. Blobs. Crisis Suits, exactly, another great one. The amount, like, those units are hyper efficient, we all know that, but they cost an awful lot of points at the end of the day. And the thing is, the Red Butchers typically cost a lot less than them. And if they can get into one of those Death Star units, they will... It's like I was saying in the game with the Thousand Suns when they went into the 10 Scarab Occults and picked them all up. I was like, man, I don't care they're dying the next turn. They just made 200 points more than they should have.
Yep.
The thing is, they're hyper efficient at killing those style units with just drowning them in dice, like a silly amount of dice. Like, people see rolling those dice, they're like, okay, is that the fight done? I'm like, brother, I'm only on the first activation. It's only getting worse for you.
See these 6s? They're 2 now. Yeah.
And God forbid they're playing Imperium. Just.
Oh. Speaking of which,
regale me with a tale, Jamie.
So in the a few weeks ago now, I was playing a game, TTS, And I had my red butchers. I started them on the table. I can't remember the mission. It was GW terrain. Just sitting in a nice piece of cover, just waiting. I had them about 9 inches away from 2 objectives. And they're just sitting there waiting for kind of like, I'm holding them back for round 3, round 4. Well, my opponent had, it was Imperium. It was a flavour of Marines. Anyway, escapes me now. Anyway, charges my red butchers with probably Vanguard vets or something, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Something that should kill Terminators, right? So I'm in terrain. I'm going to set to defend. Okay? And anyone who's, kind of familiar knows where this is about to go. Because we are playing Imperium. We are Red Butchers Terminators and we are setting to defend. So they charge in. They activate first is probably the only charge, or I can't interrupt, or I don't know. It doesn't matter. They whiff. They scratch a wound off a Terminator. Okay. So I set to defend. I've got a Chaos Lord nearby. I am hitting you on 2s, re-rolling 1s, with my Lightning Claws, and my 4s are exploding. Because I'm spending the CP for Stoke the Nails.
Stoke the Nails, yep.
I probably didn't need to roll more than just my Champions dice, quite honestly.
Yep.
It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. It was like, oh, thank you for giving me this moment. It was absurd. And then, okay, so now I'll just consolidate, and I'm pretty sure I spent the CP to consolidate for free with them. Unfortunately, I couldn't abuse the second fight. I couldn't consolidate into something and fight it for free. But I still got a 6-inch consolidate, which pushed me, 3 inches away from an objective. So now my next movement phase would give me a good charge against something else. But it's remembering, going back to terrain, remembering the little terrain rules. We're playing in a game where it's generally true line of sight, so you can possibly be in cover and not seen, so you can get that sweet 1-up save. If every model in your unit is on the same terrain piece, or a terrain piece with the defensible keyword, you can set to defend, and you should be doing that. You can overwatch on 5s, if it's like a squad of squishy Eldar coming into you and you want to shoot your bolters, and if you're lucky enough to have like Khorne nearby or something, you may want to overwatch on 5s, but generally you're going to want to set to defend against everything, because if just the champion survives, it's a horrendous amount of attacks coming back with the explosion, and it's a beautiful thing.
It is. There is just like a certain amount of satisfaction that you get out of using the Red Butcher. There's something about pulling off the right move with them that you're just like, yeah, go on the boys. You see them doing their thing. You just want to give each of them a little pat on their head and be like, well done. I'm proud of you.
The Hammer and Bolter episode with the Black Legion Terminators.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what Terminators are supposed to be like.
Oh, man.
Let's go.
Let's go. They're so good in that episode as well. I'm just like, yeah. So they've crawled back into our hearts, I would say.
I think so, for sure. I think there are things you need to consider, like obviously your list, how you're running them. I would definitely consider. I'm theory crafting lists all weekend. Another thing I'm considering is going back to the Apostle and sticking -1 on them. I'm waiting for my mission pack to come out for my GT, depending on whether the one where you can't pre-game move. I don't want to play that one, but if it does, that's going to affect my list.
Fair.
But throwing -1 to hit on a big squad of Red Butchers if I've got a pre-game move, because my GT is 30% Tau. I need to get them there. And if I'm on the table, the right mission, like the old sweep and clear conversion, I think it is now. That pre-game move, -1 if I don't go first. Because that was something else we talked about. Their Tau it kind of sucks with Tau because of the -1, Strength 5, SMS, or, non-line of sight stuff. They kind of chew through Terminators a bit, which is a bit frustrating. But giving them anything you can give them, -1, whether it's dense terrain or, the Apostle's Prayer or something, you you probably want to consider it. Because even though then, there are 250 to 280, 300 point unit, that is still a significant chunk that needs to be strong when it makes contact. So any little layers of defensibility you can throw on them, if it's the right choice, I think you should definitely consider. But yeah, okay. How do you load yours out? Or how, if you had them modelled in the way, I think we're in agreement that lightning claws, absolutely.
Well, yeah, my weapon is unequivocally lightning claws.
Yeah.
Like there's no conversation around that.
Yeah. So are we going second lightning claw? Are we going, or what combi weapon are we going? Or where's the conversation?
We're never going second lightning claw.
Yeah,
I don't think.
You're right. I think so.
And personally, I'm of the opinion that I will always probably give them the combi bolter because I like to keep them cheap, so it doesn't burn my soul when they all die to SMS or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like I was saying, coming into the upcoming Eldar, dominance or whatever, the combi bolter does really good.
Yeah.
I dislike the melta because of its close range.
Yeah.
And I think it massively suffers from, if they do deep strike in, it'll destroy the target that you're going to charge.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to bring in a big squad that are in range of two good targets to charge and shoot. It's just hard to do that. I like combi plasma. I think it's useful into a variety of different targets. But at the end of the day, for the cost that you pay for it, unless I just happen to have the points floating in my list, I wouldn't go for it. Right. So for me, it's always going to be combi bolter and lightning claw.
That's actually, I've been running them with combi melter for a while, or had been for a while, and I dropped them off a week or two ago to combi bolter, and surprisingly, even against custodies, I prefer the bolter because the volume. There's a guy I play quite frequently on TTS, and his line to me is make your opponent roll dice. That's it. That's what it is. Because your melters, you got 10 melter shots, into custody's bikes, they're probably going to make themselves -1 to hit. So you hit with 5, you wound with 3, they're saving 2.5, and then if you're lucky, you're killing 1. And then they just pull the one that was your chart that made the charge a 9-inch charge. Now you got an 11-inch charge. They'll tangle for you, GG. So, yes, I definitely, I came to it from a different way. I really wanted to make the melter work because I spent money on extra combi melters, but hey, is what it is.
I just think a lot of it for me is if I do give them melter or plas, it's like the mental stress of knowing that I want that shooting to go well, rather than having the combi bolter shots where I don't really care if it goes well or not because it's incidental.
Yes.
And just it's the reach that they have with the 24-inch max range rapid fire. You don't have to worry about shooting down a charge target or whatever. It's just like the combi bolters are happening. If they do something, great. If they don't, I don't care. If your melt is whiff, you're like, ugh, that was points. Like,
the thing I like about the combi bolter is like, let's say your crisis suits, right? You deep strike against crisis suits. And they tend to position them, like the shield drones behind them, the suits at the front. You position, in front, you shoot, they're taking it on the 4-up invuln, and maybe they take them on the Iridium guy. If they take them on the Iridium guy, thank you so much. Because if that charge goes off, I've got volume of quality attacks. Your drones will be gone, and you're giving me the easiest target straight away. So they'll probably take them on their drones, so they're not going to reduce your charge. So I'll clear the drones with bolter fire. Like if you're running 10, that's 40 bolters. Maybe you throw vets on there to wound them on 3s as well. You probably pick up 4 or 5 drones with that volume, depending on any rerolls you've got access to. And then you make that charge. Hey, crisis suits. Yeah, you did pick up a couple in the charge, but I've still got enough with that volume. So, yeah, I think I do agree, and I think the bolter is probably the optimum choice because of the reach. You can shoot a target on that side that is 24 away because you've got a multi-charge over here. I have come around to that just through experience, and your theory there, your explanation definitely makes sense and supports it. So I do agree. Now, that being said, whatever meta our audience is playing in, maybe Melter is what they need to be running. Maybe Plasma, maybe even Flamers. I mean, there are situations where all these things could be relevant.
I believe so don't quote me if I'm incorrect, but I believe Mark of Khorne runs his with flamers.
I think he has a mixed bag.
Yeah,
I remember because he
and I
ran his squad 3x5. I want to say it was at
yeah.
one of the supers last year, and I think it was because that's how they're modelled. I think.
But I think you can make it work though. He was explaining it to me where it's like you apoplectic them in the first turn and then you advance them in their movement and they can still fire the flamers because they're
Yeah,
assault.
yeah.
And I'm like, huh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Flamers are one of
there's
those
something there.
things that depending on if your opponent's got a nice screen, yeah. But like flamers aren't awful. Like they're just not always great. Like
Yeah,
they're chip a wound here or two, or pull off half a squad. But yeah, the assault play is nice because you typically will be advancing with them if you frenzy them, unless you're going second, and then if your opponent's misplayed, you're winning the game on the first charge. You know what I mean?
yep,
So,
yep.
but yeah. So I want to say I think we're actually at the moment at least pretty strong advocates of the Red Butcher Terminators, right?
Butcher meta is back, I would say.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's it.
I think I will. Okay, this is gonna hurt me to say this live. This is the first time I've admitted this, but I've finally found a unit to put in a list that is gonna stop me taking Leviathan Dreadnoughts. Because
Oh my God.
I know. The Leviathans are gonna be taking a backseat now, just because like I look at the Red Butchers and they're almost the exact same points, and I'm like, man, they do so much more than the Leviathan does. But also, I really dislike having 3 units that are like 220 to 250 points on my list because in certain matchups, like I believe the Dark Elder matchup is one where you suffer from this, where you have too many points invested in single units, and
You're restricted.
it doesn't suit me. So I think the Red Butchers are in, and I'm gonna stop playing with 2 Leviathans for a while. I think I'm gonna swap them out for Blood Slaughterers and bring some other stuff around,
Nice.
maybe some MSU squads or something like that. But yeah, they said it couldn't be done. They said my love for the Leviathans couldn't be shifted, but man, those Terminators do be looking good.
Okay, so it's no more hashtag Levi Nation. It's hashtag Butcher's back.
Butcher
maybe, I
Boys,
guess. Oh,
yeah,
Butcher
Butcher is
Boys,
back.
okay. All right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not fully set on it, but
No, I'm the same
it's
way.
how I can see it going.
They're performing much better than I expected, and that could be a bit of a false expectations because we've been so low on them, and they're performing mathematically average, which is surpasses what our expectations were. But I do think like our discussion here, diving into them a bit, seeing the utility they can have if you're playing on a terrain dense board. If you do pick the right target, if you do make the correct choice, whether it's a deep strike, frenzy, or hold back, whatever it is, if you make the right choices, they will do what they're supposed to do. And for that 2 CP, if they do get to fight twice once in the game, that it's more than paid for itself, because our typical fight twice for non-Red Butcher Terminators is 3 CP, plus the vets that you're gaining out of normally just having the strength 5. Yeah, I think, I definitely think as a community, anyone who's got Red Butchers or got some good painted up Chaos Terminators or plays on TTS, give them another shot. Find a hole in your list for them, throw them down on the table, but maybe give them some test runs before you go to a tournament. But I think we get some more people running them. We get some more people giving examples of, man, they just trade so well into, this particular Eldar unit. As a community, we come together and we start deep diving on them more, getting the beta testing done. I don't know. I like them.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, to be honest, we had the same thing with the drills, right? When we first kind of popularized them.
I didn't believe you for 1 second. You was an absolute madman. You still
look
are,
at us now.
But you was,
look at us now.
Stop clocks right twice a day, mate. So
Savage. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like that thing where it's like as soon as, so like whatever about us, making it kind of a thing, and people came up with such interesting plays with the drills.
Hmm.
I think it can happen again with the butchers because they have so much versatility and
Yeah.
flexibility, even in their loadouts and everything. I feel like we're on the cusp of something new again.
Yeah.
And it's pretty exciting to me because I love my Red Butchers. I'm a huge Terminator fan. They're just so cool.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you're like, as I know a lot of people are now, because you see it in all the forums and all the discussions on Discord as well, lots of people are at this interesting point where they want to start world leaders, but they're scared of what units to build and paint because they don't know what's going to exist and what's not. We can be fairly certain the Red Butchers are going to be in the rumored World Leader Codex. Like it's too iconic of a unit not to have,
Yeah.
and all you have to do is look at Death Guard, look at Thousand Suns. They have their Terminators there. We're going to get ours. So it's a fun project where if you want to just try them out for the time being,
Hmm.
and you can be fairly comfortable knowing they're going to be in the book.
I've been very hesitant, and I know yourself and anyone in the Discord. We're always saying, look, someone comes in saying, "Hey, I want to start World Eaters. What do I buy?" Don't buy Berserkers because they probably get a new model. You can probably buy Khorne, but if you like the old Berserker models or you like kit bashing, you can buy Berserkers. You can make Berserkers. You can make Khorne, and they're 100% guarantees, right? In my opinion, whether we get a codex, a supplement, or we're just in the CSM book, which doesn't look likely at the moment, those two are definitely in 100%. 99% is Red Butchers. I am very happy to endorse. They may get a bespoke model, which would be if you want the newest shiny toys, hold off. But if you're like me, I've got 15 or so that I've kit bashed.
Only
Um,
15. Ha!
and yeah, okay.
Ha!
Listen, I'm not a hobbyist, man. Um, but
But you could, it's like you said though, you can make really cool Red
yeah,
Butchers right now. Like there's
yeah.
a lot of
The
like the
new
new
kit,
Terminator kit is pretty hype. Like
yes.
they're menacing
Oh, the
and
strut, just the
it's
position on them. They're like they look like walking tanks. Like I just want to put like you mentioned like the Kool Aid. I think that was in the last video we did, but they just
yeah, the
call it
Kool-Aid
like have
guy.
just a broken wall in front of them is like I didn't see no wall. You know,
Yep.
it's just
Yep.
yeah they just
They ooze character. It's a
yeah
massive shame that Forge World doesn't have the World Leader Terminator kit
yeah
anymore
yeah.
because man, I have some of those guys and they
Okay.
are just so good. There is the Forge World Red Butchers as well, which fair warning right now, if you haven't worked with them before, they you can't kit bash them. They're just singular models when they
Yeah.
arrive. Their arms are separate, but they're tough to kit bash, so just
Yeah.
be warned for
And they
that.
are ever
I
so slightly smaller than current Terminators.
Yeah, not too bad
It's
though,
not
because I often
noticeable,
yeah,
but you know,
what you can do and what I've done for a lot of it is because they come with really cool axes, like very
mm,
unique looking axes. You can use the axe arms on the modern Terminators,
yeah,
and it looks really cool because it's like a mishmash of armor with
yeah,
cataphracti and newer plate. So that looks
mm,
really cool, and you can kind of basically make the most out of the kits that way as well.
yeah,
But yeah, like there's loads of cool resources, and it's just honestly like it's such a fun project. I love
yeah.
Terminators, just so cool. So yeah, Red Butchers back in the menu
Yeah,
in a
I
lot of
think
different
so.
ways.
I
Yeah,
think so. But yeah, man, I think we've summed it up there. I hope anyone watching, let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you've been running them, if you've been advocating them forever, if we're just a couple of idiots because we think we think this. But um, again, love to see you in our Discord. Give us a follow on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, man, I think we're good. You want to take us out?
yeah. Thanks again, everyone. Hope you found this one interesting. As Jamie said, can't wait to hear what this new resurgence in popularity brings for the Red Butchers, if there is one at all.
Oh, there
But
is.
until then, stay healthy, everyone. Stay safe and kill main burn.